Hello, college biology. This is our video on survival of the fittest. Let's get right to it. Survival of the fittest is the proliferation of specific mutations at the cost of others, and is the balance between natural selection and sexual selection. Proliferation, that means we're keeping something going and kind of making it more common. So, we're talking about nuclear proliferation. We're talking about making nuclear weapons more common. When we're talking about survival of the fittest, we're talking about making certain mutations more common. And let's get to the two parts. Natural selection. We'll do that first. Here's a little diagram about natural selection. I don't even... Wait, hold on. Where do I put my picture? Oh, maybe right there? I don't know. So, we've got giraffes. These are little short-necked giraffes. They can't eat. They die. Okay, let's get to the real meat of this. Natural selection is the preferential survival of some phenotypes over others. That's what it is. Preferential survival. Natural selection is about survival. So there's a couple of things that have to be true in the situation for natural selection to work. That is, one, there must be phenotypic variation in the population. If all of the organisms are identical, then there's nothing setting them apart. So there's got to be phenotypic variation. Two, that phenotypic variation must be inheritable. The traits of one have got to be able to be passed on in some way or some mix to their offspring. So once those two things are true, then we've got to have death. The population must reproduce past what the environment can support so that there will be death. This overshoot is animal's gonna die. That's gonna happen. So there's got to be death. We've got to reproduce past carrying capacity. And finally, there must be a selection pressure which determines which phenotypes are more likely to die. In this case, these birds seem to like green beetles. So when you have all four of those things, then the phenotypes that do not survive cannot reproduce. They do not get passed down to the next generation. So that's half the story. The other half of the story... I'm sorry. And these natural selection pressures, they can be all kinds of things. We tend to think of them as predators. We go there right away, but it can also be their ability to get food, sensitivity to light, temperature, disease, salt in the environment, parasites, the concentration of gases in the air, chemicals, any of those things. So selection pressures is a big idea. So once we have natural selection identified, we go to sexual selection. And the biological world has all these complex mating rituals. This is the bird of paradise hopping around to impress this lady. Well, sexual selection is the preferential reproduction of certain phenotypes. And the catch is that some of these phenotypes are not going to necessarily be good for the individual's survival. For example, we have this luxurious peacock here, which has these bright blue and yellow and green feathers, and he's got these massive tail feathers, and females find this very attractive because it indicates that he's got a good immune system. But the catch is that he stands out to predators, and it's hard for him to escape predators because he's got these massive tail feathers. Additionally, there are barn swallows. Female barn swallows, they did an experiment where they added tongue depressors to male barn swallow tails. And it turns out the females were very much attracted to the length of those tails, so much so that though typically barn swallows are monogamous and mate for life, once they added those tongue depressors to the male tails, they left their nest. They cheated on their mate. So sorry, Buzzle.com, they're not always monogamous. So the problem is that the males, when they had those tongue depressors, they couldn't fly at all. So, I mean, it was very terrible for them. So the females were attracted to this trait, even though it was bad for the survival of the male. And another example here are black widow spiders. The females will eat the males under most circumstances unless they dance through the web with a very specific pattern. And even after mating, the females eat them. So the females are attracted to the dance, but the males, it's not in the male survival to get involved in that because the males are going to die. So what about humans? Well, we do not get our adult brain until we're about 26. And this has some consequences. We reach sexual maturity first, then our bodies develop, and then our brains finish developing. The last part of our brain to finish developing, the prefrontal cortex, helps us weigh long-term consequences with short-term rewards. And since that's not always fully developed, we can make decisions that are unwise, that lead to risky behavior, that contribute to reproduction. And will tend to be attracted to terrible people. And this is nowhere better illustrated than the horrible British television show Survival of the Fittest, where they showcase terrible and attractive people. So, our notes here. Survival of the fittest is the proliferation of certain mutations over others and is the balance between natural selection and sexual selection. Natural selection is the preferential survival of specific phenotypes, and for natural selection to occur, there must be 4 prerequisites. The population must reproduce beyond carrying capacity, so deaths are certain. There must be phenotypic variation within the population. A selection pressure must be applied to determine which phenotypes are more likely to die. The phenotypes of the survivors must be inheritable to their offsprings. Sexual selection is the preferential reproduction of specific phenotypes. Reproduction, note. And these phenotypes, however, are not necessarily beneficial for survival. For example, peahens are attracted to peacock feathers because they are shiny and colorful, but the same qualities make peacocks stand out to predators. Female barn swallows are attracted to longer tail feathers even when they are artificially lengthened to hurt the male's ability to fly. And female black widow spiders will only mate with the males who rhythmically move across their webs, but then they eat those males afterwards. Humans are also subject to sexual selection. Unlike other mammals, we complete sexual maturity before physical and neurological maturity. This predisposes us to fail to consider long-term consequences against short-term rewards. These decisions can lead to reproduction and attraction to potential mates that are not in our best survival interests. I hope this helps. Struggle well.